Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Greg Roberts, a drummer, percussionist and a band leader who was originally in, well, quite a lot of bands that you probably haven't heard of, but then was in Big Audio Dynamite throughout the 80s and appeared on 4 of their albums, began Screaming Target and then Dreadzone, and has been in that band ever since and started a record label and much more. But you're going to learn all about that in this interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Greg, it's over to you.
Well, I'm sort of a generation earlier because I was born in the 50s. Even though you meant to say, well, you don't look it, but yeah, because I'm in my 60s now. So my first musical awakening would have been The Who, really. I mean, obviously, having an older brother who was into Elvis Presley, I heard Jailhouse Rock. That was one of the first things I heard. But I'd say my musical awakening was The Who. And I bought Pinball Wizard was my first single. And obviously, because of Keith Moon being like a lead drummer in The Who. And I saw them when I was 15. So and then my first album was Led Zeppelin 1.
Right.
So I started off with rock, obviously, you know. When I got into Led Zeppelin, I was 12. So it's, you know, it's like Whole Lot of Love and stuff like that. It's coinciding with my kind of like youthful sexual awakening. You know, I found something like Led Zeppelin very sexual. There was something very, you know, got my teen spirit going.
Yes, absolutely. That would have been very exciting. And having an older brother or sister or some friend can be a huge influence. My brother was 7 years older than me. This was in the 70s. He was into prog rock, which was a bit unfortunate because then it meant that I got obsessed with, yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, all those classics that you just think, oh, yeah. Thank you, Colin, for giving me those. But he did like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. So there was those kind of records that I would sneak into his room to listen to. So it does help just give you another kind of story to a
Well, that was an older brother who liked the Elvis. And, you know, I just probably that's one of the first musical memories, hearing Bam Bam, the opening of Jailhouse Rock. But I had another older brother who's like close, who's passed away now, 3.5 years older than me, Steve. He came in and put headphones on me when I was lying in my bed, woken up one morning with Dark Side of the Moon on, which sort of was a wonderful experience, you know. But I kind of avoided the prog thing, really, I suppose, even though I love that album. So, and then I used to go to the youth club. So like the whole glam thing, obviously, you know, like you say, David Bowie, Sweet and Slade, that would have fired up my imagination. And that was kind of like the same, you know, the youth club years. And then as David Bowie moved into soul and funk, we sort of like moved over. I had some black friends who introduced me to James Brown. So I kind of went from David Bowie and sort of glam rock into discovering funk and, you know, James Brown and dancing, really.
Yes.
So they kind of balanced out, you know, there's a kind of rock and roll and the dance element sort of like balanced out as I was growing up. So it had quite an effect on my formative years, I guess.
And did you follow your, you know, Keith Moon obsession through Tommy and you know, Quadrophenia and Who's Next? Was that still on?
I think when I bought my first single I bought was Pinball Wizard. There was something about the, you know, the sort of frantic acoustic guitar and the crashing in of the drums and the bass. But then when I tried to listen to Tommy, he didn't really connect with me at the time. So I went back and explored all the singles. So I bought My Generation and Can't Explain and I Can See for Miles, you know, Happy Jack.
Yes.
They were on 3 different labels. I always remember that. I had the 7 inches. So I like the short, sharp sort of shock of the singles more than sort of the album experiments. I don't really know too much about Tommy, apart from See Me, Feel Me, that period when I saw them. I saw them at Dunstable Civic Hall. I was 15 at the time, so that would have been 1972. And there was Townsend in his white boiler suit, and Roger Daltrey with the fringed thing, swinging the microphone, and Keith Moon. And so I was kind of obsessed with the Who, and especially like looking at magazines and going, oh, I'd love to meet these guys. They're really amazing. So, and it was all tied in with the fashions at the time as well. And I think that's what, going to the youth club and hanging out with black friends and getting into tonic suits and Crombies and the whole sort of suede head sort of. So it was a mish and mash, but I feel like music and clothes and fashion all sort of went hand in hand. So
yes. And did you keep your John Bonham obsession through Led Zeppelin up to at least Led Zeppelin 4 with Stairway to Heaven and Sandy Denny?
I suppose, yeah, I would know. I mean, if you were to ask me now, because I had constant debates in my head about who, like Keith Moon was brilliant in a frantic kind of like leading the group. They always let him lead, But there's something about John Bonham that I kind of place him above everybody else, really, in terms of feel, sound, power, originality, and just when you watch Led Zeppelin or, listen to them, how they sounded in those days, it was just unbelievable power. I worked when I was about 15. I was 14, I think. I worked as a Saturday boy in my dad's shop in Watford, and I used to go into the record shop next door, and they had listening booths.
Oh, yes.
If you wanted to listen to a record, they'd put it on and you go into a listening booth. And I remember every weekend I was going, can you put a Whole Lot of Love on, please? And I was obsessed with that sound, and there's something about it.
Yes. And then years later, did you get into people like Hunt Sells, who was in, did the Lust for Life stuff with Iggy Pop, with that kind of a great drumming percussion intro, and then sort of people like Dennis Davis, who worked with David Bowie on Low?
Yeah,
and some...
Dennis Davis, yeah. But Hunt, these other drummers, I think what it was, as a drummer, obviously starting out as a drummer, I was into the, but then I sort of would like the songs and everything about the band. So not necessarily, I wasn't obsessed with drummers.
No. Why the drum kit, by the way? Because it's not one of those instruments parents normally go, oh, I know, that's a good idea. Let's get a drum kit. Oh my God.
I don't know why. Maybe I should know why, because I am sort of like trying to write my book. So when I went to a school in Ruislip, they had a music room, and in the music room there was another little cupboard that had a drum kit in it, and there was me and another kid used to play on it, and there was something about a drum kit and the way it sounded, the way it looked, I picked it up quite easily, and I felt that. I mean, I was kind of, I asked my parents about getting me a drum kit, and we're not getting you a drum kit. So they bought me a guitar. So I used to pose in my bedroom and pretend I was Pete Townsend playing along with the Who, and then smash the guitar up. And then my brother found the guitar and he fixed it up, and he started playing guitar, and he bought me some like Salvation Army drums, and we set up in the shed, and that's how I kind of started my musical career, really, as having a brother who was into music as well, Steve. We were only 3.5 years apart, and we were very close.
Yes.
So we would take our instruments out into, some kind of area, and just, could be the shed, it could be somewhere down the road, and just set up and play, and he'd play and I played drums. So, and then that kind of morphed into, when he got married, he lived in Bedford, and he had a basement, and I used to travel over, and that's where we started our first band, playing. Yes. at the time, because I was really I'd really sort of taken the James Brown funk thing a lot further and got into dancing and early soul boy sort of stuff and going to clubs and dancing. So our first music that we played together as a band properly, sort of this is like my teens, I'm getting older, would have been funk stuff and covers, cover versions of lots of different things. Why Did You Do It by Stretch, Pick Up the Pieces, those kind of, white boy funk. So yeah, so even though I had that burst of rock and roll to kick me off, when I started playing, it was reflecting what I was going out to clubs and dancing to, was sort of American import,
yes,
funk music.
Did you go into the Northern Soul phase as well, or mostly was what about sort of?
There was a rivalry between North and South. We used to, they hated it. We had our funk scene, which in all these different clubs, Lacy Ladies, Scamps in Hemel Hempstead, used to drive up to London and visit these places and see these guys dancing, and it was, it was really, it was a good scene. So that kind of that channeled into what we were playing. So no, not Northern Soul.
No. What about Motown? Did Motown creep into your sort of narrative?
Yeah, Motown was part of growing up. They were just, that's the thing about Northern Soul. It's kind of, I agree with that kind of, there are a lot of people who are obsessed with Northern Soul, but it's just like Motown B-sides. Really, because they were, and the more obscure they are, the more they're popular are they with people. But I think obscurity doesn't necessarily make the best tunes. So
no, but it's it gives you a hobby, doesn't it? Really, I do remember sort of watching an amazing documentary on Barry White recently, and then remembering that kind of world that I've seen a lot of, my obsession with David Bowie and his period of Young Americans, where he gets into Philly soul music, and he has this incredible band featuring people like Luther Vandross, and then Ava Cherry was there, and just has this incredible cast, doesn't he, of people like Carlos Alomar appears, and then sort of you get Chic and Studio 54 comes up a bit later, doesn't it? So did you come into that disco world and sort of?
We kind of did, yeah. We were into the dancing thing. That's why I say I must stress that thing that just happened to coincide. It was like Bowie was reading where everything was going. Like we sort of moved from glam kind of into the soul thing. So what was the question again?
It was about sort of
about Chic.
The Chic studio.
Disco.
Yes, that's the one.
Absolutely. So we were going to clubs and we were dancing to a lot of this music, and we were really into it. And all these different acts. And then when Saturday Night Fever came along, the whole disco thing exploded, and it got too commercial, and so many people were kind of jumping on that bandwagon. But I kind of liked certain bits of disco, but it obviously simplified the beat a lot more. 4 on the floor and the open hats but
yes,
I was much more in tune with funk. I think as my playing progressed, and then we would still listen to funk, I sort of got more obsessed with jazz funk, really, because as musicians, you used to get stoned and listen to Weather Report and all those kind of things, like, and we sort of like go off into jazz rock, jazz funk, the CTI label, all that stuff coming from America. And I would sort of be a bit more obsessed with particular drummers like Steve Gadd and Harvey Mason, David Garibaldi, Tower Power.
What was Tony Thompson? Was he the Chic drummer, wasn't he?
Tony Thompson was the Chic drummer. He was great, yeah. He was really solid. Everybody Dance. I remember all those tunes.
And what about George Clinton and Funkadelic and and that kind of
connection? I've still got all that vinyl, really. I've back in the day, I used to go out and buy a lot of vinyl. So yeah, we were at War. I used to drive up to, because I lived in Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire. So This is before I moved back to London. But I passed my test quite early, and we used to drive up to London and have the cassettes of all this different type of music playing in the car. So,
And did you leave school at 16, or did you stay on and sort of?
I left school at 15. This was back in the day. It went up to 16 the next year, but I was able to leave school. I was given the option. I did want to stay on and study to be like writing and to maybe be a journalist. That's the only thing that really interested me. But my dad ran a clothes shop in Watford,
Right.
and I was already working there as a Saturday boy, and then more and more, and then I sort of left school so I could go out and earn money and buy clothes and meet girls and have a job.
Have a job. Was his shop a particular fashion one? I know I saw a bit of a documentary on this guy called John. Was it John Simons, that all these people like Paul Weller and Richard Ems and all those cats love to kind of name drop and go to? A bit of a preppy look. Did he have sharp suits from Italy and
No. I worked. My dad was a manager of a shop called Meekers of Piccadilly. They don't exist anymore. They're like Burton's. They were very sort of kind of middle of the road. They did try to get a bit trendy with paisley shirts and stuff like that. But there were other shops along Watford High Street that I used to go and buy clothes from. Can't remember any of the names now. They probably would come back to me.
And what was your relationship with the punk movement? Because I was too young for punk, but you would have been at quite a good age for it. And then there was obviously Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren and all this kind of new.
It kind of missed me. It missed me out because I was playing in a band. We were based. My brother lived in Bedford. We were based in Bedfordshire. If I'd have lived in London, it might have been very different because since knowing Don Letts and Leo, they were both sort of into that soul and funk scene. And then when punk hit, it was like a cultural change. Everybody, they started going to punk clubs more. And I used to come up to clubs like Shagaramas, which was like a black music, gay club. And all of a sudden that became something else, became a punk club. I think the Roxy, actually. And so the punk thing, I'm very conscious of that. It really passed me by. I was not interested at all.
No.
One of my first attempts at writing a song was sort of an anti-punk song, really.
No. Did you go to places? Did you go to clubs like, was it the Sombrero Club?
I remember going to the Sombrero, Crackers, Sunday lunchtime sessions. I'm very much obsessed with the dancing and the kind of the dance music and the funk. And like I say, I got sort of obsessed more with drummers and funk and jazz funk. So all that whole punk thing passed me by. So when I came to actually eventually come to meet Mick Jones, which I'm sure you will refer to later on, I could groove. I know I had to play grooves, which is what Mick was looking for, really, rather than just like all like Clash fans like turning up. So yeah, going back to that period, punk didn't mean a thing to me, really.
No. And then sort of as the 80s kind of, wombled in, with sort of Thatcher and the Falkland War, the miners' crisis, and then sort of we had, Greenham Common and sort of potentially nuclear war on our doorstep. Then musically things changed. You had the Blitz Kids and that new romantic scene, didn't you? And then there was Robin Miller with his kind of production sound, and then Sade and that kind of smooth groove with people like Simply Red. What was your early 80s like at this stage?
Well, actually, at the turn of 1980, I decided, because I was originally born in London. I was born in Islington, and we lived in Kentish Town. My father was managing the same shop, Meekers, so he moved to different branches. So he was managing the Watford one, and we were living in Leighton Buzzard. So as soon as the opportunity came, I thought I need to, because we'd already started trying to do a band, like I told you, with my brother. But that kind of, we went out on the road and we were touring, but it kind of all fell apart. and I realized I needed to go out and earn some money. And I came up and had some interviews, and I got a job in the King's Road working for Cecil G. Just at the turn of the 80s, just before 1979. So I would travel up, I would commute up from Leighton Buzzard to the King's Road, and then I eventually got a flat with somebody, and then I moved back to London. So, and then I started playing drums again when I had sort of opportunity to get a drum kit again. And I was on the fringes. I started to go to auditions, the early 80s. I started playing with as many different people, trying to meet as many different musicians in London as I could possibly, really. So there was all this, the fringe, you know, I'd buy the Melody Maker and Enemy every week, and then look at the back of the Melody Maker for adverts and see what was going on. And I was aware of all the sort of like that Billy's scene, because there was very much a funk undertow in the clubs, you know, there was very much. So I went for a few auditions. I went to audition with Haircut 100.
Classic.
in No Miss Studios in 1982, I think it was. And I think in my memory, because I'm friends with a couple of those guys on Facebook now, and I've met Nick Hayward before, but my memory is that they offered me the job, but I kind of turned it down because they wanted me to sign some contract. Next thing you know, they're on Top of the Pops. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and then I kept going to auditions and working with different people just to build up the confidence and get used to being in situations. I auditioned with Mick Kahn.
Oh God, the coolest man, the coolest bass player ever.
Yeah. So that was good, and I played with Gino Washington.
Love Gino. We used to go and see Gino as much as possible. He was absolutely...
yeah. So he had that kind of tight soul thing, and that was great to get your chops going. And then offered all different kinds of jobs, and I got the opportunity to go and play and record an album in Venezuela with a Venezuelan sort of artist who was looking for, like, he came over to England to get some musicians, like a drum, bass and guitar, keyboards, who could sort of play reggae and funk and, you know, trying to get that kind of policey sound. So
yes,
I went to Venezuela, and while I was there, that was like 1983, I spent quite a few months there because they invited me back to help mix the album. And while I was there, I was like, when I come back to England, I got a feeling that something's going to happen. So I came back, I had nothing. I moved in with my brother, and I put an advert in the Melody Maker. And then the same week my advert was in, there was an advert from for this band. I've still got the advert. I posted it on Facebook a few times.
Yes.
And it was for Mick Jones's new band. It didn't say Mick Jones. It just said, you know, no time wasters, got to be sharp, look good, play well, you know. And I went along to this big warehouse in Preston Road, West 10. And I auditioned, and then I was asked back a couple more times, and then he took me on and another drummer, and then sacked the other drummer in front of me, and then said, "Look, okay, you got the job." And that's 1984. So yeah, my early 80s were like, I'd say I know this because I mean, obviously, you know, I've got quite a good memory, but I'm trying to write my own sort of memoirs, or, you know, try and piece it together, what happened. So, you know, apart from being diligent in sort of like just keeping up, trying to meet as many people.
Yes. Try
and play well, try and, you know, be a good person. There's some moments where you go like, how did that happen? What if I'd have missed that? You know what I mean? What if they'd have, because by the third time I rang back for the Mick Jones thing, there was this guy answered the phone. He was the sax player that was playing with them at the time. And he went, no, you haven't got the job. And then, because I only had a pager in those days, you know, you
yes,
used to try and get hold of you, and I had this pager, and it's like, no, you come along for another audition. So
my
yeah,
God,
some opportunities that just everything fell into the right place. But I think you can often feel like, looking back on my life, you have to create your own destiny. You have to will your sort of what you want to happen into being, and it's always been that way, you know. So
Yes, well, I think from speaking to quite a lot of musicians, I think one of the things that people are amazed about, that something did happen when it happened back in that period, but realize you had to put a lot out there, probably had 90% of it was a bit of a waste of time, met lots of people, but one little thing does happen and you get that kind of green light, and it then moves on to the next stage. And realizing as you get older, you're sitting there and you get these offers and, you know, do you want to meet up for this? Do you want to do this? And you think, no, I don't want to do any of that. And you're probably, you know, out of all those kind of, you know, think I can't do that. One of them might have been good, but you don't know which one, do you? But you're not, as you get older, always prepared to say yes and go and meet and, you know, spend an afternoon sort of, you know, not messing about, but, you know, sometimes feeling like that was a bit of a waste of time.
yeah, you've got to put in the legwork. You've got to get out there, meet people, and it was different in those days. Well, obviously, you know, nowadays it's kind of people are consumed with their gadgets and their devices and the internet, and I don't know if it's would be the same, but yeah, those chances happen just because of meeting the right people and making the right decisions. Really, I could have been in Haircut 100 maybe.
Yes, fantastic
and
day.
gone back on the dole. So
it was good, but then because the 80s, you know, it was an interesting period during that kind of, you know, there was that production sound, the Trevor Horn production world of, you know, ABC and Frankie, and then there was, you know, people like, you know, Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran and Phil Collins, Simply Red. So there was these mega smooth grooves, you know, this kind of, was it some sort of, I don't know, was it gated sort of reverb or something that people used?
yeah, I mean, I started to take an interest in more in how a record sounded, which coincided with me. I had a Walkman, you know, that back in the days when you had a Walkman
Yes.
And like I say, when I went to Venezuela to do this album, I came back to London. They invited me to come back, so to help mix. Not that I could mix; I didn't even know what I was doing, but I'd made some suggestions production-wise that obviously the artist liked. So I remember listening to Michael Jackson's Thriller, like non-stop, and Yes album with Owner of a Lonely Heart, which was Trevor Horn's
Buggles.
And to me, the Owner of a Lonely Heart that's the first time I ever heard samples used in a particular way, because it had boom, this drum break, which was like, where is that from? You know, but the actual Trevor Horn, Steve Lipson, that production team at ZTT was just amazing. So I started to get fascinated by production. Obviously, that did stem from, like, I was a big fan of Steely Dan as well, and Asia was one of my most played albums. But
oh yes, I loved Katie Lyde. I thought it was always got some kind of good memories about Steely Dan and Katie Lyde.
Yeah, so. Steely Dan with our sound man, we're always arguing because he likes early Steely Dan. And he was like, nah, all that jazzy stuff. And but to me, Asia is just like, and also it has the best drum performance from Steve Gadd on the title track, and Wayne Shorter from Weather Report.
Oh yes, we love Wayne. But then during that period, and as I was kind of searching through my gig tickets and came across Big Audio Dynamite, I did notice a lot of gigs for Sly and Robbie and the Taxi Gang. Did you become fascinated with the world of reggae? And I know Sly and Robbie.
Absolutely, I'm glad you reminded me. Yeah, so pre-BAD, sorry, yeah, we've got me playing with lots of different things, and I've said Gino, but one thing I did miss out was myself and my brother heard about this opportunity to go and audition with this band in Brixton called Red Cloud, and they had this singer Floyd Lloyd. So This was like 1982. So we went over and we auditioned, and I learned how to play reggae. And they liked us, and they asked me to join, even though I didn't really properly know how to do the one drop. So we used to sit in this studio in Brixton, and we had two guys there, an old percussionist called Bongo and a sax player called Chemist. They were both in their 60s, and they used to like tick, 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 and show me where the three was, which is essential. I don't know why I missed this out before, but this is essential for how my playing developed, because learning where the three was after playing so many years of just 2 and 4, the backbeat with funk, to learning how to do the one drop and turn the beat around. So that reggae, that's where I started to take a lot more interest in reggae. And I was with this band for 6 months. We were in Brixton at the time of the riots as well. So I played in a reggae band, then I went off to join a more experimental reggae band called the Creamies. So that's where I got my reggae chops from. And so obviously, yeah, Sly and Robbie, he came to my attention where there was a tune, I think it's the Viceroys, called Heart Made of Stone.
Right.
Made of Stone. It's got this amazing syncopated drums on it. And I was like, who's that? And it's Sly and Robbie. And then we used to listen to Black Who. It was like, oh, it's Sly and Robbie. Nearly every reggae record I was listening to was Sly and Robbie. So I would put him down, if I had, top 5 influential drummers in my life, like with Steve Gadd, John Bonham, I would definitely put Sly Dunbar.
Yes. And there was also those electronic kind of pads, weren't there, which were always very thrilling at a live gig. They always seemed to kind of create a bit of tension and excitement at all those kind of moments, really.
Yeah, I had, I think Mick bought me some Simmons drums when I joined Bad. So I always had they were a bastard to program though, you used to get like trying to get the right sound out. So yeah, that was sort of like early part of like learning about electronics with the drumming.
Yes, and at that stage,
all that amalgamation of being in Venezuela, learning, getting into salsa rhythms as well, and then reggae and funk and disco, and then by the time I came to meet Mick Jones, I could play all these different I could turn the beat around, I could, groove really nicely. And I give thanks that I got the opportunity, because if it wasn't for, because when they started a year earlier, and they were called something else, Track, and it was Mick and Topper, and Leo was playing bass with them. So it was, and then Topper was, well into his smack period. So it's very sad that they couldn't, that's why they had to look for somebody different to play drums. So it was that, that sad. It's very sad, but that was brought up the opportunity of, and Leo the Dread, I kind of locked in with him straight away. So Leo was like, yeah, we like this man. And because I've been in reggae bands, I was able to know at the audition there, yeah, Irie man. So, and I was, also, I was easy to get on with, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, I knew my place, so it was nice to join and just sort of learn from all the people around me.
So had the musical ideas of Big Audio Dynamite already been formed before you joined, or did you help sort of create the sound for that first album?
I helped create certain things. I wouldn't, they had a bunch of demos which none of them there was probably one or two that sort of developed into other ideas that made it onto the first album. But one of my most distinct memories that when I first joined, Mick lived by Port Bella Road in Colville Square, and we used to go to his flat and sit down. He had a little music room, and he put together this track which had like huge chunks of the spaghetti western stuff, you know, the speech from Clint Eastwood. And so, and a lot of those ideas developed from Mick, but then obviously us playing a lot together helped him formulate. But it took a while for us to find what we were going to do, even though I joined in April '94, and then when Don joined, it wasn't until much later, you know, we went on tour, we went and did some festival, some shows with U2 in late '84, and our first 2 live shows in the UK was in '84 as well. And then we went back to the drawing board, and Mick had bought a house in Holland Park, and we started to write more stuff. So it came together. So my contribution is a lot of the programming on we had a Lim 1, we had a Lin 2 drum machine. I used to go, when Mick bought a new house in Holland Park, when he was going to move out of his flat, he hadn't quite moved out. So he gave me the keys, and it had all the studios set up in the basement. It had a 8-track recorder, a keyboard, a little sampler, and drum machine. And that's why I used to go in there like at night and then stay there all night, like smoking spliffs, and then come out in the morning with a cassette with this mad little thing that I created. And it was like the most exciting thing, because I managed to create something. It was on an 8-track, which gives you a kind of discipline compared to what you put now, because you lay stuff down on the 8-track. You have to stick to that arrangement. But it's where I learned to sort of like, oh, I can play a bass line here. So there was a couple of ideas that I came up with that made it onto the first album. And I've got a tiny bit of writing on the first album. But a lot of it came from Mick, obviously with Don as well, with lyrically. And then Dan joined after a while to add the keyboards. So it was a group effort, but obviously guided by Mick. And Mick was the main man, the producer, and you know, he knew he had his vision as what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And I mean, and he took me on to be the drummer, and to be fair, he wasn't to know whether I could handle a drum machine or make it, you know, do exciting things. But then I used to take it back home to my flat, which I share with my brother, and I used to learn, and we even tried doing a cover version of Expansions, which is a jazz funk tune. So I'm learning how to program the Lim 1, and I'm getting to know it, and I'm using drum machines more. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but I'm glad I was able to do it rather than go, you know, I'm a drummer, I don't need to.
Yes.
I always felt that because I couldn't attain that kind of level of drum musicianship that people that I admired, like Steve Gadd and, you know, the top session players, that I knew that I could probably excel in other areas, or sort of learn how to use technology, which is, you know, in terms of having a career in music, is the most important thing for me, because I was able to master some technology and start writing my own stuff.
Yes, and you had sort of Adrian Sherwood and the On-U sound system, which was also using interesting rhythms and percussion and sort of, you know, cut-ups from, you know, either crowds or sort of chanting from the terraces or sort of Thatcher. So there was that, you know, that sort of style started to happen a bit more in the 80s. I mean, when you brought the second album out, Number 10, Up in Street, that roars into being with Come On Every Beatbox, which is an enormous song. But there's also a fascinating one, talking of percussion and drumming, which is the last track on side 2, which is Site C MC, isn't it? That's quite a wild bit of drumming on that.
Yeah, that's the drum machine again. That's the DMX I was using, but also there's a lot of live percussion that I overlaid on it. It is a mad track, I have to say, and but probably some people don't know about this. Doesn't matter if they do. Is that with Come On Every Beatbox, we took the album, a lot of the tracks that we recorded in Trident in Soho, we took them to America for 6 weeks to start mixing stuff, and some stuff didn't sound right. So Come On Every Beatbox there was friends of friends knew this guy, Sam Sever, who was a kind of a hip hop producer, programmer. And he came in and he programmed, I'll never forget it because I was in the studio and I was watching. He came in and programmed the 808 and the 909, like early in the morning, like smoking these neat, like ganja spliffs. And I'm like, how is he doing this? He was only about 18. And they sounded great. The beats sounded great. And that was a lesson to me. There's, that somebody could come. Obviously, it's going to feel a bit daunting. You feel a bit put out, but I learned from that. I said to Mick, I could be your own little Sam Sever. He did that and another track. Obviously, I did stuff like Site CMC, which is, it's got a kind of, remember, it's a DMX machine on that. So when it comes to live drums, there's not a lot of live drums on BAD stuff. There's a lot of programmed stuff.
What was great about that second album was it just seemed to sort of flow really nicely, the track listing, and it does have a good kind of narrative. It's not a concept album, but I do remember a lot of fond memories playing it back and forth and enjoying Dial a Hitman, Beyond the Pale, but obviously Come On Every Beatbox is such an enormous song to start with.
Yeah, it's a great song. It used to be great live as well. Obviously, it's got that kind of Eddie Cochran kind of 50s element mashed up with like the very sort of advanced technology. So that was always a favorite live. And it was all a bit of a blur, really. Once we all started, and the album came out and it did really well, and Equals MC Squared did well, and we made the videos and went on tour, and we went to America, and it was just like all sort of like rolling along and picking up pace. And we were able to expand our ideas a bit more and get more involved in the writing. Hence, there's a lot more writing on the third and fourth album for all of us.
Yes. How did you cope as the 80s trucked on and we suddenly entered that kind of more rave world with Ecstasy and sort of the Chicago house sound and acid jazz and acid rave music and stuff like that? What was that like for the band? Because a lot of times I've spoke to people and they said, well, so-and-so started taking Ecstasy, that slightly threw the band. And I know Hawkwind always had that problem where several members did one drug and the other members did the other drug. And it was always going to create a lot of tension. What was it like for the band at that stage?
It was good. I think Mick got really excited by the whole rave thing and then wanted to co-opt it for the last album, Megatop Phoenix. Obviously, I think I took my first Ecstasy was in 1986. And we'd have it in America if we're going to the clubs in New York and stuff like that. And while we were set up doing the mixing the second album in New York, while they were busy working on the tracks, I went to see Prince at Madison Square Gardens, and I had some Ecstasy, and it was quite. So it opened up my mind the same way as marijuana opened up my mind. I've been lucky enough to not get bogged down with the wrong drugs, really. I mean, it's a bit of ecstasy now and then is good. We always used to say, it's like a drug for Christmas. You don't do it all year round. It's like, so in terms of creativity, I don't know. It kind of opened up that acid house thing for a channel that we could go down. But I think Mick was more enthusiastic about it than others were. We used to go to a lot of clubs and parties and get involved in that, and a lot of overspill from a lot of those people that would come to our shows. And I suppose it had an effect on us, but we never really changed that much. The same way as like Ecstasy had an effect on people like Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses, but they still were kind of rock and roll sort of bands, really, in a way. But To be honest with you, I was a bit skeptical about just suddenly jumping on the bandwagon, whereas we were taking a lot from dance music anyway, and we were making dance music. I just think that for me, like when I left, and in the early 90s, that's when it got more interesting, when more bands were coming out, Renegade, Soundwave, and Left Field, and Underworld, and Prodigy, and a lot more bands were making that kind of music, and that had more of an influence on me than just at the tail end of BAD suddenly going like, oh, like acid. I used to know that guy. We used to go down to that club. He ran a club night, Gary Hazeman. Oh no, Paul Dennis and his friend Gary Hazeman, who used to be down there at Legends, and they were acid. There was a crossover there, but I wouldn't say it was like massively.
Yes. I know, and I suppose it was around that same time that New Order brought out Technique, which was kind of their big moment, wasn't it? That was the album that sort of kind of gave them. I think they'd seen Arthur Baker, or sort of had an Arthur Baker remix, and that had slightly galvanized their dance kind of path in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we got to know Arthur Baker, and yeah, it was fun making those albums and being in America, like you say, Dial a Hitman, and having Matt Dillon and Lawrence Fishburne in the studio with us, and then going out for a drink with them, and then meeting up with Iggy Pop, and it was some mad times, and I was still quite young, so and then I met my future wife in 1988, and things were sort of coming to a head with BAD about who's getting our involvement more respected. I'll save the juicy details from my book. But and then my wife had got pregnant, and then kind of felt like I was pulling away from the band. So me and Don and Leo split to form Screaming Target. So and that's starting to look more at being more independent, and then follow my own musical path.
Yes, absolutely. Screaming Target then. Was that did that feel like a big decision when Big Audio Dynamite finished for you, or was it at the time kind of inevitable? Did it feel like, yes, we've done it now, that's time to move on?
It kind of did feel inevitable when it came down. It came down to start business things as well. Like actually, I can't even talk about it really, but we felt like we could break away, and after being in that band for 5-6 years, we built up our own musical knowledge, and there was a time on the third album when Mick was ill and he was in the hospital, so we were in the studio writing a lot of stuff together anyway, and then Mick would come in and play his guitar over it. So and then actually one of the catalysts was in 1989 I got a small single deal with a small label to make a track, which I did under the name of Mac 1, and it was called The Right Stuff. It's not that great, what I mean, but it's part of the steep learning curve, same as I look upon Screaming Target as a bit of a learning curve as well.
Yes.
About how to sort of produce your own record with your own sort of vision.
And Mac 1 came out, and
Mac 1 came out. It's like, please don't dig it up. It's just awful. I think I spent more time on worrying about what the cover looked like, and but it was me like breaking away, and exploring. I had started to do other production for different people at the sort of tail end of Big Audio Dynamite. I did a hip hop artist called MC Brooklyn. I worked with a singer called Catherine Buchanan. I was starting to do remix. I did a remix for Big Audio Dynamite, Just Play Music. I did my own remix, which made me think, wow, this is really good. And I was, that set me on the path to just wanting to do my own stuff, and having stuff my own sort of set up at home, little 4-track cassette recorder and a drum machine and a keyboard and a sampler. I was starting to put my own tracks together. So And the sampling thing was like a big opening for me, because when we first started sampling stuff with BAD, and I was like, this is amazing. And then I'd hear something and think that would make a good sample. So I started to collate cassette tapes with all these different snippets. And then when you're on tour in America, I had my beatbox with me and I record stuff off the radio, which has provided me with, so many different samples, spoken voice and stuff like that. And then when DAT started to come in, I started to make DAT tapes of samples. I've got a whole kind of, loads of DAT tapes full of samples. So sampling is the key for me. If I hadn't sampled certain things, I probably wouldn't have the kind of career I got.
So with Scream and Target then, which was taken from Big Youth, was that you did one album on Island Records? Were you surprised that you didn't sort of continue that through the 90s?
Yeah, kind of in a way, but we were lucky because we left BAD and we started to work in Island Studios because Don knew everybody at Island. The Suzette Newman, who was kind of Chris Blackwell's right-hand woman, she was looking after us, and then they put us on Mango, which is a subsidiary of Island. And the A&R guy there was a guy called Jumbo, who sadly passed away. So we were given a deal without having to make anything. We were like, and we made a bunch of we recorded a bunch of demos in the Island writing rooms, which is, I don't know if they're still there, but in Hammersmith. We did 6 weeks in there and we had all these different things that were like, okay, great. And that's where the fortunate meeting of Tim Bran, who I started Dreadzone with, he came over from Guernsey and he got a job with Island Records working. And his first job was like, okay, you're working with these guys. They're writing stuff in there and there used to be Big Audio Dynamite. He's like, oh, great. And Tim Bran was just amazing. He'd sit there and he knew what was what. We'd ask him to make a cup of tea and he'd be like, really, have I make tea? But that's where I met Tim and then we started to hang out and he did some live sound for Screaming Target, and then he ended up mixing one of the tracks on the album, Who Killed King Tubby. And then we just started hanging out as friends and really became one of my best mates. And he used to come around and I'd play him ideas, and kind of that's where the beginning of Dreadzone was. After we didn't continue with the Screaming Target thing because we made one record and it didn't sell and we'd spent a lot of money, so we got dropped by Island. So we got a new manager and we tried to write some new stuff, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And so at the same time, I'm writing new stuff on my own. And that's how sort of Dreadzone.
Yes, and they got picked up by Creation Records, which is quite an unusual label for Dreadzone, I would have thought.
It was, yeah. So I'd just done a few demos, and I had a friend that come around, a French friend who was managing Screaming Target, and Luc Vergier, a very good friend, worked for Sony Records. And he came around, he heard these demos and he was like, oh, yeah, let me introduce you to a few people. So I went to a publisher. The publisher introduced me to this guy from Adam from Wow, Mr. Modo, which was the Orbs label.
Yes.
And we went in the studio and we were going to record some stuff. We recorded some stuff that was going to come out on Wow, Mr. Modo. And then they ran out of money. They didn't have any money, so they couldn't afford to pay the studio bill. So I went off on holiday, and then when I came back at the beginning of the year, this guy, Luc Vergier, he'd gone to Japan with Alan McGee to see Primal Scream at the Budokan.
Right, yes.
And they're on the way to the gig in this limo, and he pops in this cassette, and he plays it to Alan McGee, and he's like, yeah, I like it, I'll sign them. Just three, I think it was 3 or 4 songs. So that, that whole chance thing of like him playing it to Alan McGee. So when I came back from holiday, we were there was a deal with Creation waiting for us. And by then we sort of had an album, an album's worth of stuff. So they paid for us to go into the studio in March 93, where we recorded the first Dreadzone album.
Yes. And it was a kind of a perfect time because from memory, there was that kind of real festival movement, wasn't there, happening with people like the Levelers and Censor, and just kind of, I suppose there was that Wonder Stuff, yes, that's it. And, there was a sort of, and Dreadzone has a sort of a soundtrack that is very good for sort of dancing to, hasn't it? And sort of raving and sort of, yes, being at a festival, listening to Dreadzone, you did sort of pick up that zeitgeist.
It seems like, yeah, because we learned in Big Audio Dynamite and then from Screaming Target, and then we realized that we didn't have to have all the vocals and the songs. You didn't have to think about songs. So I was much more excited about the dance movement, like in the early 90s, because it started to pick up and it started to progress. You had people like Left Field or whoever, and they started to do more interesting things instead of just like acid house tracks. There's nothing wrong with acid house or any of that, but it started to progress a lot more. Your Orbital and people like that. And so we had the fusion of that. We sort of carried on the dub stuff from Big Audio Dynamite through into Screaming Target, which we expanded on. So to have that dub element mixed with the dance, the kind of the new sort of energy of dance, and because back then it was just house and techno, really. It was just those, Chicago and Detroit, and then what people were doing with it in England. So mixing the dub with the dance and then using a lot of samples, film samples, and electronic keyboards, and having a lot more space to be able to create. That created our own particular sound, which kind of seemed to chime with, like you say, what was going on with the festivals. We didn't do our first festival until 1994, but when we did, it was Glastonbury on the Pyramid stage, and John Peel was there at the side of the stage, and he was blown away by it. And
yes, dear old Mr. Peel.
But it's signing with Creation was great, and our first agent was Alex Nightingale, who's the son of Annie Nightingale. So he was the one that he was looking after the Orb as well. So our second only show was this amazing thing in Denmark called the Trekkerner Festival with the Orb at sunset, Dreadzone, System 7, Paul Daly from Left Field, Darren Emerson from Underworld, and then the Orb at sunrise. It was just this amazing show, like a mile out to sea in Copenhagen Harbour on a floating stage. So Alex Nightingale was our agent. So we were getting these great opportunities. And next thing you know, Annie Nightingale, rest in peace. She only just passed away. I always remember she phoned me up at home, and I got this phone call from Annie Nightingale going, "I really have heard your album and I really like it." So that was a real buzz. So yeah, everything started to pick up from there. And we had that kind of nice underground thing going on with Creation.
Yes, and it was kind of strange because the 80s was very sort of dominated by Thatcher. Then the sort of 90s come in, and there's this sort of economic upturn during the John Major years, which obviously New Labour really sort of capitalise on in a way. But you sort of, there is this sense of slight another. But I remember the sort of 80s, and it was quite grim, really. The festival scene had become quite grubby, and there was the Travellers or the Convoy that used to be a bit sort of destructive. And then suddenly the festivals seemed to be a little bit nicer. They were still wild and a bit out there, but they didn't have that kind of sense of Mad Max in them. And then sort of soundtracks like Dreadzone sort of fitted in alongside people like I mentioned before. There was just a sort of a new generation who were kind of entering that world of kind of the 3-day festival.
Yeah, I think they were called, there was a movement, it was like Crusties, I think.
Crusties, that's the one.
And with those kind of bands, and Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and the Levelers and all that festival vibe. But yeah, we came along just the right time to capitalize on that. I think what helped us as well with the dance music thing that set us apart was because we played as a rhythm section from Big Audio Dynamite. We were able to play live along with the technology. It was obviously fraught with you always think something's going to go wrong because you had to run these machines while you're playing. So it's still the same these days. We use laptops and that, but you're always worried that the technology is going to break down. But the fact that we had the live drummer and the live bass player mixed with the electronics made for a very unique sound. There wasn't a lot of people doing that. There was, it was obviously just much more techno based.
Yes, I think there was a few people. I think that Petrol and Motion used to try and play with some sort of different ideas, didn't they? But you did, which were quite big decision. They sampled something from, was it Brother D and the Collective Effort? They had a sort of a chorus they used. How are we going to make the Black Nation rise or something like that? There was a bit of a dance thing happening during the 90s that would started in the 80s.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Where we fitted in I don't know. There's so many elements going on there, but yeah, we.
But you did 2 John Peel sessions quite early on, didn't you? Which is always is almost a little blessing, really, isn't it? When you get the Peel sessions.
Yeah, we did a John Peel. Actually, yeah, just when John Peel saw us, he did offer us a Peel session, but we had already done one, which was while we were still because we did Dreadzone, the first album, 360. It's just me and Tim, basically. Because when I moved on from Screaming Target, I realized I needed to push my own vision of how it was going to be. And obviously mixing that with what Tim wanted to do it was just a duo. So when we signed with Creation, it was just me and Tim, and we went in and made 360. So when we had to play it live, went to Leo. Okay, do you want to play bass? And then Dan Donovan, who played keyboards with Bad, we got him to join. So people think we just came straight from Big Audio Dynamite, but when it comes to something like Dreadzone, we'd already tried to do something with Screaming Target, and I felt that I had to take control of what we were going to do, and it was just sitting at home. I was kind of desperate for a while, after Screaming Target was dropped, I had to go and sign on again, and I had a kid. We were living in Lancaster Road in West 10, and I had to go and sign on again. And I was doing all this music. I was trying to do adverts. I was trying to do all these different productions. I worked with Ari Up. Don put me in touch with Ari from the Slits.
Yes.
And we did some tracks together. That didn't work out. And it's just from the perseverance of keep writing your own stuff, merge the reggae and the dub with the dance. I had my MPC 60, which I've still got at home, my sampling drum machine and a sampler and my rolling keyboards. And, you just had to create something that that you were in charge of, really. You had to take control, like Mick took control of Bad. So that's what I did,
Yes.
And,
was it difficult to follow up for the third album, Biological Radio? Was that quite
you jumped Second Light now all of a
sudden? Sorry, Second Light.
No, because obviously. So how long is this going on for? Is it a 90-minute one?
Well, possibly, yes, yes, that's fine.
Well, you can edit it down to an hour. You edit it out.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, it's interesting. The second album, because this is when it really the planets line up, don't they? Everything.
Yeah, the planets really do line up. Obviously, it's it's all started to pick up with Creation and doing all the gigs, and we took on a management. And then all of a sudden, Creation found Oasis, and they started to spend all their time doing that. And our this management said, let's take you off Creation. Why don't you just go and do your own thing, work on the next album, and then we'll get you a deal. So it's very fortunate that I had a great publisher at the time, at the same time as getting 360 out. I had a good publishing deal with BMG, and my publisher, a really great friend at the time, said, look, I'll give you 10 grand, which is recoupable. Go and make the album. So we went and made Second Light without being signed to anybody. It was funded by the publisher. By then we were Tim, me, Leo. Dan didn't really want to sort of carry on, so he's not really on Second Light. And then we met Earl. So we made Second Light in Queen's Park in a studio. And then we took it to somebody who I knew from the past as well, who'd originally given me my singles deal while I was still in bad. This guy called Paul Kinder, now worked for Virgin Records.
Mm.
And we had this showcase. We did a little show at Shepherd's Bush Empire, but just on the stage with a small amount of people, and we played live, and then we were offered a deal by Virgin. Funny enough, we were really good friends as well with Paul Oakenfold at the same time, and he had his own label out of an office in Kensington, which was a subsidiary of a big label. Anyway, Paul Oakenfold wanted to sign us as well, but Paul Kinder, their offer was better, and it was Virgin Records, for God's sake. And we did a deal, and we got our advance. You know, we'd already paid for the album, and we signed to Virgin and put out. You see, Paul Oakenfold, he said, what I want to do is I want to put out Captain Dread first, and I'll do a remix of it. So we never know how that would have turned out. But as it was, we signed to Virgin. We did Zion Youth as the first single, and then we did Captain Dread, and then we did Little Britain as the third single. And we wrote a song to go over the top of it, because Zion Youth had sort of nudged the charts. They were like, you really need a song, because Little Britain on the album, if you listen to it, it's just an instrumental.
Yes.
So we had to sit down and write a song in this green and pleasant land, you know, which came quite easily, and Earl sung it, and we did the single version, and it got into the charts, and we got to number 20, got on top of the pops, and stayed at number 20 for a few weeks, and that really spurred the album on. So yeah, we played Glastonbury 95, we played not the Pyramid. That year we played the Enemy stage, and then we did the dance tent on the Sundays, and everywhere you went you could hear Second Light coming out of people's cars and vans, and it was just like, and they were showing the Zion Youth video on the screen between acts on the Pyramid stage, so it was like, yeah, we've arrived. So Second Light was big. 95 was great.
Yes,
they have that. And then obviously, like as you say, with the third album, we're like, yeah, you can do what you want. So we spent too much money in studios and had to come up with a follow-up quite quickly. Whereas Second Light had gestated for a few years from Screaming Target, you know, some different songs which I had sort of buried away. So we had to write a follow-up album really quick, and it didn't sell as much. So yeah, Biological Radio. But in retrospect, a lot of people still like that album. So you know, it was a bit rushed, and we should have just maybe took the money and just built a studio. But as it was, we were like, let's go into the country and set up in this Oast house and take mushrooms. And also another thing, that Tim Bran wasn't involved with the third album. He'd been offered this thing, an internet startup called Res Rocket Surfer, which was which was exploring making music over the internet.
Right.
There was a lot of money involved, and he didn't like being on the road. Tim hated touring, so yeah.
What was it like keeping the team together? Did you find that quite a responsibility?
Yeah, I did. In retrospect, we had a bit of success, and it probably might have gone to because everything had gone to plan. It was like, oh, brilliant, this is working, this is great. And so there was probably a little bit of friction, as with all bands. But yeah, we made the third album, then we got dropped by Virgin, so I had to kind of regroup and just rethink. So yeah, 1998 started a club night, started making more dance orientated. I think with Biological Radio, I was trying to follow up Second Light with the same kind of, some of the same themes, but getting a bit more esoterical and worrying about the subject matters, aliens and angels and the planet and climate and whatever. It's a classic move.
And also, I suppose we were also creeping up to the millennium and the millennium bug, and there was this kind of sense of, wow, this is incredible. We're sort of ending this kind of century, aren't we? We're sort of moving into another whole different. We felt like it was, now it seems a bit ridiculous, but at the time there did seem a sort of sense of something ending, and we'd had New Labour for a few years, which felt very optimistic and happy, and we were partying and it was all good, but then things started to go rather sour, didn't it? So yes,
yeah,
existential.
I think we got carried away with that. We all thought, like obviously after years of tours, we'd notoriously dropped John Major's resignation speech into Fight the Power at Glastonbury '95, which recorded, which is on the bonus CD on the re-release of Second Light. So yeah, and we kind of got, doing Fight the Power and then going, and the whole thing's like the criminal justice bill that was trying to outlaw dance music and raves. We kind of got involved more politically, which kind of, I don't know, sets you back because it gets you typecast as kind of a political band, which we weren't really. Coming from the background of Big Audio Dynamite, we were like, I've learned since then, like if you have anything to say, a bit more subtle about it. So,
and did you get to meet Gary Asquith as well from Renegade Soundwave? Did you? Because you
meet Danny from Renegade Sound. I met Renegade Soundwave at festivals in the '90s, and I got to know Danny very well. And Danny's like one of my best friends. He was around here the other day playing me some new music, and
it's just kind of interesting because there's been a bit of interest last year. Someone made a film about a sort of a band called Rima Rima, and it had people like Marco Peroni in it, Gary Asquith, and various other people who all formed bands that were part of were on 4AD Records, as well as Dorothy Max Pryor, who was on drums, who had been in Throbbing Gristle. So it was just interesting that, that was where a lot of them started, in Rima Rima. They lasted 8 months and then
I don't know that name. I know 4AD. I know somebody who used to work, Howard Goff, used to work for 4AD, and he's the one who played me because they had Color Box.
Oh yes, God, they loved the Color Box.
When I was in the 80s, 1987, I got given this tape by this guy, and he was like, "Listen to this. It's called Mars," and it was like, pump up the volume without all the extra samples in it. But that's kind of, there is that dance, there's that element of dance music crossover in lots of indie and rock and roll.
Is it an Augustus Pablo song they cover, isn't it? I think, which is
yeah, Baby I Love You So, yeah.
What a classic.
And Shy One Horse, the spaghetti western.
Yes. So then recording your fourth album, Sound, this is on a new record label, isn't it?
Yeah, we had to regroup. So what I did, I sort of reconnected with Tim, and I had a studio next door to him on Kensal Road. And I had a little office there, and I was gonna start a label, and I was gonna do this and I was gonna do that. I never did it. The label comes much years later, but I started a club night so that I could focus more on DJing and finding some new outlets there. And plus, there's music that started to happen with the, we started this club night called Dubweiser, which was kind of like anything related to dub, but with offshoots, like, so you'd have breakbeat, like people like the Freestylers, or dub house, or the early parts of drum and bass and jungle, which was very dub and reggae influence, or just, we had guest DJs would be like Man Professor, Alex from the Orb, Don Letts, and me and Danny from Renegade were like the resident DJs. And that
was this was this a little bit of a concept like Jazzy B had for Soul to Soul? Did you feel
probably? But it was once a month at Notting Hill Arts Club. So it was a chance for us to get together and socialize and have people come along. One time was I was there playing one of the early days, and I was playing this record, and I played another record, and this guy standing there went, those records you just played, they're all on my different labels. And one of the labels he ran was this thing out of Camden called Finger Licking, which is kind of like a funk breakbeat label. So we ended up hooking up with them, doing a remix for Finger Licking. They did a remix for us. And, that's the Freestylers, that kind of thing where breakbeat and ska reggae was kind of crossing over. And I used to go out looking for all the records that kind of had dub and reggae influences. And, it was a nice energy to have the club night. So I'm gone in a roundabout way to say that kind of fed into what we were doing with sound. It was kind of like we were straight to a soundboard. We went back to the dance floor. We got away from all that kind of hippie nonsense on biological radio, aliens and angels and all
ley lines and pyramids.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. Biological radio itself is kind of like an Aldous Huxley kind of thing about, we all tuned in to the same thing. So with sound, it was kind of like straight back to the dance floor. And there's some good songs on it, and it's me and Tim in the studio, really. And I think after the second night, it's my favorite second album.
Yes, and you get Brinsley Ford from Aswad.
Brinsley came in. It was the first time that I'd been introduced to Spee. He used to come down the club and sort of do some MCing. So he's first track, and it samples things like Papa Levi, and it samples the Chiefs of Relief, who used to tour with Big Audio Dynamite back in the 80s, and they used to do this song, "We Got the Freedom to Rock."
Was that Paul Cook's band?
Paul Cook's band, yeah. Matthew Ashman, who sadly passed away. So stuff like that. And then, Don Letts co-wrote some lyrics on Digital Mastermind and Different Planets. And all in all, and we had time to work on it, from 98 through to 2001. And the label it came out on is our good friend Luke Vergier, who played our tape to Alan McGee in Japan. He had a label called Rough Life, which was like an offshoot of Sony, I think, doing like American hip hop acts mainly. I don't think he had any English acts. And he was like, "Yeah, you do the record." He was such a lovely guy, because years later he was like, "Yeah, you can have that album. That's your album." No contracts, and one of the best people I know in the business.
Amazing.
You need people like that, So yes. Making the sound, it was very simple as well. And we went to Don. It's like, "Oh, we're looking for a title for this album." And he was sound. I was like, okay. And the artwork as well is very much there was a lot of stuff springing up around West London that was Banksy doing like the ape on the wall and stencil stuff. So the cover is a reflection of that kind of art that was happening at the time with the stencil. It was done.
Yes.
So it all did really well.
But then after that comes out, there's a bit of a gap, and there's got a massive kind of change in lineup, isn't there? Yeah. Does everything got change at this stage?
We had me and Tim had a studio together, and we made sound, and then we had to take it on the road. So Tim was like, "Well, I'm not coming on the road." And then we met somebody. Already met this other guy, Ben Balaphonic, who did the same thing as Tim. He was mixing and that, and they swapped desks in the studio, and he moved into the studio, and then became our kind of guy. But then, we did have a lull. There was a lull where sound had been out, and then that was gone. And then we did like a load of remixes and production for different people. And then we didn't know where to take it, really. And then you can cut this bit out, but this new guy grew up with the whole rave thing we were talking about with ecstasy, but you should cut this out. He's from that generation that was very young and taking ecstasy, and then when you don't take ecstasy, you replace it with cocaine. So he was a bit of a heavy cocaine user, which kind of fed into the next album. So, but I'd suggest you to. I allude to that on the sleeve notes of the re-release of Once Upon a Time. And even Ben was like messaging me, "Why are you putting all that?" It's like, I don't know if I want to talk about that.
No. Yes, okay, I'll remember that.
Oh, so there was a period there where we didn't have a deal, and obviously the club night wasn't happening anymore. But what we had was this thing called Dreadzone sound system, where we'd go out, because we'd be going out. I'd been going out and DJing and that, but with Spee on the mic, and then Ben now as two DJs. We'd go out and do a lot of Dreadzone sound system shows. And then we even did a stripped down version of our live show where there was me and Ben, Spee and Earl, and the sound man, and we all drive around to do these festivals in a little people carrier and no drums, just me on a pad. And we did that for a while, for 1 year. But we realized we had to, because when I started working with Ben, we were like, okay, it's got to be something else now, because he was very much a producer in his own right. And he was like, let's do a new project. I don't see why it should be Dreadzone. So we did this thing called Mafia Tone for a little while. But then we realized that we had to, Dreadzone is a good name. And there's a lot of love out there. So we had this guy, another old friend of ours, Biff Mitchell, who runs the Glade stage at Glastonbury. He had a label called Functional, a breakbeat label. He offered to release some records for us, and we did a DJ Dreadzone Sound System DJ mix album, and then followed it up. We finally wrote enough stuff for an album, which my late brother was involved quite a lot playing guitar. So in the period between this is something on my Dreadzone Facebook page. I've been doing because last year was 30 years of Dread. I've been doing all the history, and then I explored that period as well. There was a few years where we didn't really do much as Dreadzone, but we came back together. We got this release out on Functional Records, Once Upon a Time, and it was all going great. And we were out there touring, maybe getting a bit too carried away with the partying as well. And 2006, we got a bit, everyone was getting a bit like, irritable with each other with all the sort of hedonistic lifestyle. And Ben left. And then in October of that year, my brother took his own life. So it all fell apart. So
Yes, geez. And your other guitarist, which is called Steve
Steve
Roberts,
Roberts, that's my brother, yeah.
and then
He took his own life, and we had to go away for a while and see what we were going to do. And we came back, auditioned a new guitarist, found a new guy to do all the technology with the laptop and the mixing on stage, and found new management, which is a DMF was probably one of the best things ever. It's kind of like, say, management. It's like they started out as our agent, then they became our manager, and then they became the partner in the record label. DMF, they look after the levelers and lots of different acts. But
right.
they run the Beautiful Days Festival for the levelers. So they got involved, and we started our own label with them. Dave and Laura Farrow, they're really, best friends.
And this is Dubwiser. This is the label.
We started the label Dubwiser at the end of, like, say, 2009, and with the new act, with Chris Compton on guitar, Chris Oldfield, and Leo and Speed and Earl, and myself. We got together and we wrote a new album, Iron the Horizon, that came out on our own label in 2010. And that brings us, and we were doing really well, and all of a sudden we get the offer to reform Big Audio Dynamite in 2011. So
yeah.
that brings us full circle back to.
I remember when listening to a documentary about with the police, and they reformed because obviously there was a lot of money on the table, and they realized that there was 3 members. Everybody around them was loving it, apart from 2 of the members of the band, and they had to sort of have band therapy to try and sort out some issues to continue the tour, so they could all get their paychecks. What was it like with Big Audio Dynamite?
Well, this time around, we started our own sort of Big Audio Dynamite reunion company kind of thing, and our agent was Simon Moran, who's kind of looking after us and putting. Yeah, he's quite a big name in the business. He looks after. I think he used to look after people like Take That, and he's a top manager. And a lot of this stemmed from this guy in America, Jerry Harrington, who used to be Joe Strummer's manager. Because the year previously, like when we're doing Iron the Horizon, Mick's out on the road with the Gorillas. So Mick and Paul Simonon. So Mick got a taste of playing live again, and got meeting Jerry Harrington in America. And Jerry Harrington was like, "Yeah, if you put the band back together, we can get Coachella, and we can get you Lollapalooza." And so we got back together, and with all good intentions. We had, like I say, Coachella, playing in LA, playing in New York, doing an English tour, and doing a lot of festivals. So 2011 was a complete rush, really, to be able to come back to Big Audio Dynamite after, forging our own way and making some considerable success, I think, with Dreadzone. To come back and then to be able to enjoy that level of gigs and response with a bit more of a, because it was all a bit of a blur and a rush in the 80s.
Yes.
So it was, and it was incredibly enjoyable. There were so many things going on, but it didn't go beyond the 1 year. So
there you go. What was your highlight of all those festivals that you played in the UK and America?
I would say playing at Coachella, Lollapalooza. We played the Exit Festival in Serbia. I don't know. Some of the I think the highlight of the tour would have been playing 2 nights Shepherd's Bush Empire, sold out. I was watching a bit of that the other night. There's somebody recorded it all from the balcony, and it's they're great shows. Everybody's singing along from the beginning, from Medicine Show, and there's great energy. So it was worth doing. And I've been writing a blog since 2010 or before. So I wrote, there's a lot of that on my WordPress page about what it was like.
Yes, my God.
But yeah, and it was incredibly good. And then, but it didn't go any further. The next year was doing this Justice tour with Pete Wiley and the Farm. For the 92 Hillsborough.
Yes.
And he was involved in that, and he didn't seem to want to write anything new. Also, halfway through the Bad tour, Dan was doing a few funny things, so we had to replace him. So it wasn't the best of times for Mick. Mick was probably wondering, why the fuck am I doing this? So but we were all having a good time, and it was good to break up the Dreadzone thing, to suddenly go off and do Big Audio Dynamite. So we gave her the impetus to come back, and we were using Mick's studio, because Mick had this studio in Acton, which he had for years, the Bunker, and we used to rehearse there, and then we went back in, and we recorded this. We had the energy to write a new album, Escapades, which got Mick Jones on one track, and some of it, it's quite an eclectic album. There's quite a lot of guitar in there as well. So the energy and the inspiration we took from the Bad tour was channeled into the next Dreadzone album, Escapades. Yeah, which did okay. And then
yes, did you tour that particular album?
Yeah, we've always been taught. And the thing is, when you look back on having the agency that we have, we've got this thing where, every year, maybe it's different this year, maybe, some years are a bit less than others, but we've got a set of spring dates that we do, and then we've got the festivals, and then we do an autumn tour. So there's the demand out there, and then we can sell the certain shows. Some of them would sell out. So yeah, we toured Escapades. We did a video for Too Late that had Mick Jones in. There's some good tracks on Escapades. I think it worked really well. But
and
then,
did you enjoy having your own record label at this stage? Was that sort of quite a interesting learning curve?
Yeah, of course. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to. It's great to be able to have the funds there, to be able to afford it. But yeah, it's a buzz, and you get to expand the vision of the band and be able to, have the right artwork. We started working with this guy, Glass Siren, who did the cover for Escapades. He works out of Leeds. A guy called Damon Roberts. I've never actually met him. We've been working for 10 years. So he did the label logo, the star. Yeah. He did the cover of Escapades, kind of a blend of love and revolution and sort of semi Russian art. And so yeah, it's great to be able to have the kind of art you want, and shape the albums how you want, and have remixes done. But times change, so maybe remixes don't have the kind of currency they used to have, and videos don't get made so much anymore.
No, because then the last album you recorded, Dread Times, this was about 7 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a time back now. 2017 we released it. Once we finished sort of touring Escapades, we started writing new stuff. And by this time, like even with Eye on the Horizon, even though we had the new band, I had my younger son, my older son, Marlon Roberts, was playing keyboards with us. So he played on a few tracks on Eye on the Horizon, and then he had a bigger contribution on Escapades. And then by the time we've come to Dread Times, he's in the studio with us, and he's helping not just with the keyboards, but like here's a change here, you know, and he's very integral to the sound of Dread Times. And yeah, it's a very complete album, Dread Times, because we're still working in mixed studio, and we're all together writing songs, and so following on from that, and it was very well received. So following on from that, obviously we were going to start looking at new stuff, but then I'm working with Marlon a lot more, so I wanted to introduce an act where he's got more of a control over what he's doing. So that's when the idea for Dubweiser Volume 1 came about, where I'd start introducing other people into like the Dreadzone family. So I don't know if you got the Dubweiser stuff, if you know it.
No.
It's probably not so much on Spotify because it's different artists. And even on Wikipedia, they don't even... Basically, we had this thing, Dubweiser Volume 1, where we've got different artists, got this Submantra, Professor Skank, Luci Luamici 1, Basil, who's in the band. Oh yeah, well let's not forget that he's going to hate me for saying that. After the BAD tour, we didn't have Chris Oldfield working with us anymore, so we had Basil joined us in for Escapades album. So he's been with us ever since 2012. So he's an artist in his own right. He does drum and bass. So anyway, I don't know why it's not up there. I was looking at Spotify the other day. It's Dubweiser Volume 1. It's a kind of like, there's a couple of Dreadzone tracks on it. And it's introducing new acts onto the Dubweiser label and then expanding the label. Where are you looking?
Yes, well, I'm looking at discography here on your Dubweiser Volume 1 and Volume 2 here, and just seeing your track list.
Okay. So that's the thing. The worrying thing on Wikipedia, it's just the last thing we did was Dread Times. So in the meantime, I wanted to introduce, and they've done quite well, actually. You know, like they were, my label partners were a bit skeptical, but I wanted to expand the labels, so we bring new artists in, so it's not just Dreadzone, you know, because that's, you know, Dreadzone's not going to last forever. And so Dubweiser Volume 1 we released, and then we started working on a new album, and then 2020 happened. So
yes.
So the pandemic put a halt to everything. So I thought, what's the point of working on this album? We'd already started writing some stuff in 2019. So I was like, what's the point of doing it if we can't go out and tour? So I started working on we were working more remotely with different people. So I wanted to do Dubweiser Volume 2. And I'd started working with this person, Emily Capel.
Oh, yes.
And then Gaudi. And then there was a band that did a version of Sight CMC, which was a Big Audio Dynamite track, which I remixed, which we ended up licensing to be the first track on the album. So even though it seems like we haven't done anything since Dread Times, we've actually done 2 compilation albums, and then we did a release Rare Mixes, which is older tracks from around the 360 period. And what else did we do? Anyway, we're working on that, which is our 9th album now. And it's taking quite a time because the Spee, who was singing with us, kind of opted to step back from the live touring last year. 2020, was it last year? 2023? No, it's 2022. He stepped back, so we had to reinvent the live show a bit.
Yes.
Taking up a lot of time. So, and then last year we started mixing the final tracks for the album, and that's taken it's taken far too long. But a new album from Dreadzone, which will be our 9th release, official artist album, will be out this year.
Excellent.
So we've come full circle, and I'm getting.
Yes. Did you ever have much of a crossover with people like the Afro-Celt sound system? You know, because I just sometimes, I know I shouldn't say it, but kind of slightly associate the two, you know.
Yeah,
bands.
that eclectic thing. I do know them guys. One of them sadly passed away, I think.
Simon sadly died, Simon Booth.
Yeah, I don't really have that much contact with them, but yeah, they are similar styles.
Well, yes, they just had a kind of a collective vibe, didn't they? Which had a musicality that sort of mined down into different genres and different avenues.
So I don't know what I don't know how to present this new album, but it's got Earl 16 on it. There are a couple of tracks to spare. I don't want to give too much away actually, because I'm not. People know that we're working on a new album, and everybody's like, "Come on, when's your next album? Your last one was like." Actually, nobody's really said that. I always think that people are going, "No, what? Come on!" But we've done Dubweiser 1 and Dubweiser Volume 2, which, for me, I collated all the Dreadzone tracks and the collaborations on that onto one playlist on Spotify, and I called it 8.5 after Fellini's 8.5. But
yes,
it's not album 8 and it's not album 9. It's kind of like it's all the Dreadzone stuff, and there's like 8 tracks on it actually, and that's on Spotify somewhere. I think I did the playlist. So we haven't been like just sitting around doing nothing. We have done a lot of new music, and you know, like I say, like in lockdown, I got to know this girl Emily Capel. We did this wonderful track together, Flamingo, which is about the Christine Keeler story, and then we wrote this track together called Dreadtown, which was a single from Dubweiser Volume 2, and we did a video which was directed by Don Letts. So that's worth a watch.
Yes.
So I'm very pleased with that, and she was an artist in her own right, and she started work on her second album, but she's kind of given it up for a while. So I don't know what's happening with her, but it was exciting to work with someone like that, a singer, you know, guest singers. All the time I want to expand out, and then because I think it was quite closed Dreadzone over the years, and then having your own label and having a compilation and having the freedom to be able to bring in different people, it's made me much more open to collaborations. And you know, one of the interesting things that made me want to do that as well, not apart from having my own son who was technically good enough to write his own stuff, is I was spending a lot of time in Crete with friends. I've got friends over there, a guy called Professor Skank, who's like a reggae and dub producer in Crete. He invited us over 10 years ago to play this festival that he does out there, the Reggae Vibes Festival. And me and Spee and Earl went, and we got to know him. And because it's so nice there, and he knows all the good restaurants, and I've got friends there, I go back there every year. So I went last September, and it's like the 11th time I've been there. It's like, but it's really great because he did 3 tracks with us on Dubweiser Volume 2, and he did 3 tracks on Dubweiser Volume 1 as well. So yeah, Crete. Well, we got a track called Crete and Skank, and if you listen to Dubweiser Volume 1, there's quite a lot of sunny tracks on there. So that kind of time spent in that place has soaked into the music.
Yes. And you toured at the end of last year, which was probably, had you done many tours this decade, or was that the first kind of big one after the lockdown?
No, we've been touring every year, really.
Yes. It was just a bit more
touring
tricky.
takes up a lot of time. So like when in 2022, Speed decided that he didn't want to sing anymore, and he caught COVID, he lost his voice, he was in bad shape health wise, and he just needed to step back from Dreadzone for a while. So we had to kind of rethink the live thing. So we had to bring in some older tracks and some different tracks, and actually preparing those things take up a lot of time. So yeah, that's why we've been touring. Yeah, last year was our 30th year of Dreadzone, so we did an extensive tour running from September, October, November, December. Quite a lot of dates.
Yes, absolutely. And are you finding new people discovering the band?
Yes. People, over the years, you get people who come along and my parents used to play your music while I was going to sleep and stuff like that. And a lot of people who grown up, their parents like the music, and people who happen to be at festival and they go, oh, Dreadzone, okay, and check them out. And then you can't help but be moved by the sort of groove that we have, with our coming up. It's 1984 to 2024. Now it's 40 years. I would have been playing with Leo as a rhythm section. So when you're hearing us live, that's what you're hearing. You're hearing that 40-year history with us, with the technology and good tunes.
Yes, this is right. I think Picasso, was he doing some interview once, and he drew a little picture and someone said, God, that's a masterpiece. That took you 5 years. And he said, no, that was 60 years of my life. So it's probably the same thing, isn't it? I'm comparing you to Picasso.
Sorry, I'm talking too much. Well, a tickly throat.
Yes, well, it does happen. No, I was just saying, a little anecdote about Picasso scribbling something, and someone said that took you 5 minutes, and he said, no, that was 70 years of work. That little scribble.
Absolutely.
So you do have that kind of ability. Plus, you were playing in the sort of 70s, so actually, you've probably got more like 50 years of experience.
Probably, yeah. I don't know when.
1974 was probably you were playing drums.
Yeah, I probably had 74, 76. I would have been 18. So yeah, it was that period of like all that early dance, sort of going to clubs and then starting that band with my brother. And yeah, I've learned a lot of stuff, picked up a lot of stuff along the way, but managed to create my own world. How I was just talking about me. It sounds a bit me-centric. But...
And just lastly, if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there any little words of wisdom or sort of hints or a little nudge that you would have said, oh, that would have been a good idea?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't change too much. I mean, people say to you, what advice do you have for young musicians? I always say, stay away from cocaine. The worst, you know what I mean? But
yeah, because there was somebody else died last week of cocaine, and some comment from a slightly older person said, unless you know who grew it or made it, you're just risking your life on it. So there you go.
No, I don't. I mean, the thing is, in my whole life, I started probably about 18 years. I've probably been smoking weed since like for 50 years. So I started probably when I was 18, smoking hash and then weed, and like I always think that that's probably like makes me really reflective, and maybe has helped me make the decisions I've made. I've not been a big, I like my wine these days, but can't drink too much of it. But because I've got COPD now, and I've got really a bit asthma related stuff. But marijuana has been a staple in my life. That's why I've got my little cake here, so. And I've got some oil which I'll have, and but I don't know what I'd say. Yeah, I'd say stay away from coke, but I've had good times on that as well. So I've got no regrets, really. I mean, I'm in my late 60s. I feel, I don't feel like I'm this age. And I was wondering the other day, what's going to be like when we're 90? I mean, what am I going to be like? It's just, can't imagine that. I don't feel old, you know what I mean? But I am, you know what I mean? I was born in the 50s. So I've
Yes.
experienced the greatest arc of human, to me anyway, like post-war, all the way through, like all the best music and the best, greatest culture and whatever, like through the technological revolution. And yeah, if I had to say, I don't know, my 16-year-old self, I don't know, anybody now, I'd say stay off the internet. Stop looking at your phone.
Yes, this is also true. This is true. Anyway, look, I'll let you I'll let you have a drink of water. But look, thank you ever so much for your time for this. This has been amazing.
Is it going to be an hour long, or
well, I might have an unedited version, because there's often people get in touch and say, oh, you should really get so and so. They would be brilliant to hear. And I go, well, I know them, not you, but I know the music. And I think, oh, yeah, that would be a great idea. So it was like somebody.
Thank you for taking the interest. I mean, that's why I'm always like, really? Because I do interviews, and then sometimes I think, and I read them and I go, or I hear them and I think, why did I say that? So it depends on how you feel at the time, like, and how the conversation flows, really. But I suppose that's like anything. Like, you don't like the sound of your own voice. I don't like sometimes. I'm sort of basically telling you my life story in music there.
Yes, this is true. Well, anyway, at least it's.
I hope it's been interesting enough.
It's been amazing. No, and like I said,
probably that's why I keep going round in that. I'm keep going. Oh yeah, let's recycle back on that bit, because there's lots of like links. Like, oh, I met this person, and then this, this happened, and then you suddenly remember this. And
yes, anyway, it was nice to remember your tickets. Anyway, £5 to see Big Audio Dynamite.
That's decent.
That's quite decent, isn't it? And £6 2 years later. It's a bargain.
Where were they? In London?
No, UEA Norwich.
All right, is that where you are?
Yeah. There you go.
We were in Norwich at the
Epic Studios.
Do you know Rick?
Yes. Yes.
So he doesn't work with them anymore.
Oh, isn't he? I don't.
I think he's taking it to a different venue next time.
Right.
So you didn't get to see us then?
No, I did see a few gigs last year at Epic, but I didn't see Dreadzone, which was a bit unfortunate. But never mind. Was it a good vibe?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's a very big venue. It's but we had about 400, 450 in there. So yeah, it was a lot of people bouncing.
Yes, it's got a bounce. There you go. Anyway, I see you've got a few dates already lined up for the summer, and then you'll have an autumn gig as well, will you? Yeah,
there's I don't think anything's gone on. When is this coming out?
Probably in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, because they're going to be announced at the end of January anyway. We're going to do 6 shows with the Orb. Co-headline.
Excellent.
So that's because we've just done 30th anniversary tour, and it's like, okay, we've got to do something different now. And then I was talking to my manager, like, because they're based in Exeter, and I was like, have you seen like Suede going out with Manic Street Preachers, and so is going out with there's all these double headline tours that people are doing. I thought that sounds quite interesting. We should do something with the Orb. And he was like, "Wow, what a great idea!" Phone Alex out, because I know Alex really well. So So if this is not coming out for a while, that's good, because then they're going to
Yes.
announce it in a couple next week, I think. Actually,
Brilliant. So you got 6 dates with the Orb. Is that in
Yeah,
the
just-
summer or?
no, it's March. Sorry, it's April and May. There's 3 one weekend and 3 the next, and they're decent sized venues, but we're going to see how it works out. You know what I mean? Because we don't normally, like on the UK tour that we just did, I do the DJing as well. So we're not a big one for support bands, but it's going to be interesting to see how we do double headline. We're going to play an hour each. So
Yes, that's going to be that's fun
let's see how it
times.
goes.
Well, it sounds like a perfect marriage, really.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be good. Anyway, look, I'll let you get on, but thank you again for your time. This has been amazing.
Nice to talk to you, David. Thank you, and
I'll keep in touch.
enjoy the rest of the evening. And yeah, keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. And
Yes,
if
I can send you a link. And that, dear listener, I know I had to stop it sometime. Anyway, look, a massive thank you, as always, to Greg Roberts. I think he goes as Greg Dredd as well, for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. Just to say that Dreadzone does have a website that you can find out more information and dates and other bits and pieces. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's a true story. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.